Everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Executives agree. Jerami Grant, not a great idea. Plus, JJ Redick has a full coaching staff. All that coming up next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always free and never behind a paywall, and Locked On Lakers on YouTube. So where you can go hang out with over 25,000 subscribers to the channel, Andy, all of whom are still like they're kind of wanting the Lakers to do something, but Andy, they're wondering what that thing could be. They are also curious to see who is making the fully filled out Lakers coaching staff. That happened on Monday. The release going out, the Lakers have finished filling JJ Redick's staff. So all that coming up in the course of this show. Do want to let people know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So we had Mike Richman on, Andy, last week. It's a really good show. You can go back and listen to it if you missed it.
He's the host of Locked On Blazers.
Right. Doing a full-on scouting report on Portland forward Jerami Grant, who is, again, save the perpetually trade gettable Zach LaVine, is the only other guy on the market the Lakers of prominence. We'll maybe get to Lauri Markkanen, some news about him that is applicable for today. But the Lakers can't get Markkanen. They could, in theory, get Jerami Grant. As much as he wants to see the Lakers lose, Andy, Mike Richman still could not bring himself to be dishonest enough to tell us that he thought that trading for Jerami Grant was a good idea. He said it wasn't.
No, and according to Sean Deveaney, longtime NBA writer, currently working with Heavy.com, Mike Richman is not the only one who thinks that this would be a bad idea for the Lakers, particularly if it cost them 2 first-round picks. Sean Deveaney, in a piece that he has out, spoke with an exec. I didn't specify whether it was Eastern or Western Conference, but an NBA exec who thought that Rui Hachimura and a pick for Jerami Grant would actually be a terrible idea for the Lakers. Quote, this is from the exec. If they get Grant, I'm not sure they are that much better as a team. It's a bad contract. He's a good shooter, but he's not a very good defender. I'm not sure he is that much better than Rui. So if you're giving up Rui and the draft pick, I can't see them making that move. It's just a trade for the sake of making a trade, and that's always unwise. So without knowing who this exec is, Devaney is keeping his sources.
Presumably it could be Rob Pelinka.
Well, I suppose it could be, but that would be pretty dishonest work by Sean Deveaney. But
it would be.
I am assuming that this anonymous exec, if he thinks one draft pick for Jerami Grant is a bad idea, 2 is just what the F, man. And it's interesting though, because we've been, opening up the mailbag, whether on Twitter at Cam Brothers, people tweeting out to us, or the community section of the YouTube page. And we've had some reader comments and questions about Jerami Grant. There was one from EN_reader12. How realistic is it for the Lakers having a path to land Anthony Simons in a trade alongside Grant, possibly Robert Williams? I'm not a fan of giving up both first, but would consider it in this likely fictional package. With the Blazers signing Devontae Graham and having their young core, it seems like Simons' days in Portland are numbered. It's interesting. I had originally responded to EN saying that I wouldn't read too much into Devontae Graham's acquisition as Simons being on the way out, just because they're such varied players and Graham is kind of a journeyman. Except then a couple days later, I saw
Simons is a significantly better player than Devontae Graham.
Yes, but then though a couple days later, I saw a report, and I cannot remember which Portland Blazers beat writer this was, so my apologies for not crediting him, but this person said that they thought Grant and or Simons could be out the door, but one of the other definitively. And in thinking about Ian's presence about or the premise of his question, getting both of them, like just for the sake of thinking about this, Jerami Grant makes $34 million, Anthony Simons $26 million. So that means the Lakers need to get together almost $60 million in salaries. Also, it's been well established that the Blazers do not want D'Angelo Russell because they have a glut of guards anyway. But I started thinking about where could the Lakers even reroute D'Lo in order to make this thing even a possibility, just so they can send out these salaries. I thought about involving Brooklyn and Cam Johnson. This is a trade I ultimately came up with that we'll get into whether or not I think it's a good idea, but it just speaks to how insanely difficult it can be to try to make these sort of moves that would feel like it's worth both first round picks and everything else in this hypothetical trade.
Oh, Jesus. That's a lot. That's a lot. If you can't see it, there's a lot on the board here.
I'm gonna break it all down, and also where both Lakers firsts would go, not sure. Where all the seconds would go, not sure. But just for the sake of this hypothetical, assume they're all going out. The Lakers would receive Jerami Grant, Anthony Simons, and Cam Johnson. They would send to the Blazers Rui Hachimura, Gabe Vincent, Jared Vanderbilt, and Dalton Connect. And they would send to the Nets D'Angelo Russell, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Christian Wood, the highest of the veteran minimum salaries, and Maxwell Lewis, because he would just make more sense for Brooklyn as a young player than, say, Cam Reddish or Jackson Hayes. It would leave the Lakers.
Why isn't Bronny on the block, man?
Politics.
Can you imagine they trade him to Brooklyn, for God's sakes, after all
politics? So this would be the Lakers starting lineup. LeBron, AD, Austin Reeves, Anthony Simons, and Jerami Grant. The main bench guys are Cam Johnson, who's making 20+ mil, but there's really nowhere else to play him because he can't guard twos. Max Christie, who Portland or Brooklyn would want, but for the time being, if they did this now, they can't trade him. Jackson Hayes, Cam Reddish, and Bronny. I would argue
open up all those minimum spots that fans want.
Yes. I would argue that makes the Lakers potentially worse than where they started. It is not empty the house better.
Right.
No.
I mean, Anthony Simon's a good player. And he's young, so I mean, you can make that argument.
He's 25 or 26.
Yeah, I mean, he's a pretty young guy.
Mm-hmm.
I think there could be a fair amount of interest. I will put it this way: the Portland would have a lot less trouble trading Anthony Simons than they would Jerami Grant. Where like the idea that Grant is going to cost you two first rounders. Or like even really one high first rounder or something like that for a guy who is, 30 years old and owed another 100. Is it 100? About 60 that he's got left, or 100?
About 130.
About 130. Yeah, something like that.
Over 4 years.
Over 4 years. Like, again, we're starting to get into that. Wait a minute, you want us to take that contract on? We're so, we have to give you like high value picks. Don't know about that. Simons would have a much more robust market to where you could talk about, the possibility of but it's hard to, that trade that you put up really does get to the point of how hard it is to do. And then, okay, somebody like Robert Williams, does that require a first rounder? It certainly shouldn't, given his injury history, but that's the point. Like, why on earth would you use limited capital, which the Lakers, that is, the description of the Lakers. Why would you use limited capital on a guy who is wildly unreliable to be on the floor? I'm not talking about freaking, like, he's got chronic, perpetual, yearly, months long.
For those unaware, Robert Williams played 6 games last year and then in early November was out for the rest of the year. We've not seen evidence of him being back on the court. It is true that when he is healthy, he can be a defensive monster. Like, he is a good player when he's healthy, but he is rarely healthy.
He played 6 games last year, 35 the year before, 61 the year before that. 52, 29, 32. And I realize there's some COVID years and stuff in there that shorten the seasons and all that kind of stuff. But he's played 41 games in the last 2 years. That is not a track record that I like. And it's not like the ones before that where you get like a Brooke Lopez situation where, a lot of 80, some 82s and 80s and 70s, then a bunch of foot injuries and then a bunch of 82s again. Like that ain't it. And so let's stay on this next because it gets to this issue that the Lakers have about where to go and how you evaluate a player like Rui relative to a player like Grant. We'll get to it next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Game Time, and some of the best memories that I have growing up involve going to St. Louis Cardinals games as a kid in the summer with my friends, watching Ozzie, Willie McGee, Jose Oquendo, or as an adult in the summer with my friends at Dodger Stadium. And if I want to go to a baseball game, I go to Game Time first. It's an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. The prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to the first pitch. The Game Time app is easy to browse through to see the upcoming games. They got flash deals where you save even more on selected seats ahead of the game. Also, the zone deals that allow you to save extra when you choose a section. You let Game Time choose the seats. And the lowest price guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
So we'll get to this, continue this trade discussion here in a second. I do want to let people know that the Lakers announced on Monday the completion of their coaching staff for JJ Redick. We've talked about Nate McMillan and Scott Brooks, Bob Byer, the longtime Oakland. Jesus, I'm really struggling tonight. Orlando, I believe was the O word I was looking for. Assistant there, Greg St. John and Greg St. Jean, I believe it's pronounced. Lindsey Harding, we did a whole show about, and Bo Levesque, who was with the Clippers as their lead development guy, head of development. So that is the staff, along with Michael Wexler as head video coordinator. So I will be 100% transparent. I do not know enough about, the roles that each of these guys are expected to have with the Lakers, with where they were before and all these other things to really get deep on, is this a good group for a first-time head coach or not? Will they play well or not to Redick's strengths or potential weaknesses? But they do have some guys who have been around the block at the very least. So that part of it, they tick the boxes that they were looking for.
We're also efforting to track down some people more familiar with some of these specific coaches. So we'll be looking to bring in, whether we're talking about different Locked On hosts or different people we know who cover teams around the league, just to hopefully familiarize our audience with these coaches, give a little bit of scouting report, stuff like that, like we did with Matt George, Locked On Kings with Lindsey Harding. So that's something for you guys all to look forward to throughout the rest of the offseason.
Yeah, it's just it's one of these things. Like, I know, for example, I would recommend even going to listen to our friend Crangus McBasketball, Tim at _NBA on Twitter. This is sort of his domain. And looking at it, I don't think he's totally thrilled with the group that they ended up with. I don't know what else was on the table, whether or not they really had access, names like Sam Cassell and all these other, some of these other guys, like trying to buy out coaches that had really good gigs on other teams and either promote them here or just have them move laterally for significantly more money or whatever it might be. It'll be interesting to see if any reporting comes out where the Lakers may not have been willing to pay. But I will say Nate McMillan and Scott Brooks did not come cheap. So
I also too, and this is pure speculation on my part, but I don't think it's speculation that's at least doesn't strike me as totally out of school. It wouldn't shock me if some of these assistants weren't wild about the idea of relocating even for more money laterally to serve under somebody that has never coached before and in a lot of ways skip the line.
Yeah, I agree. And for a team where the stability in those coaching staffs has not been particularly strong. So that's something we'll keep looking into and get to as things go. But we obviously wanted to pass along that information to you. So on the surface, it's a staff with a lot of experience, but we just don't know enough about who's going to be doing what and where and what their strengths and weaknesses might be. To really get into it. So something to watch for as the summer progresses. Back to this whole Jerami Grant thing and the questions that go on around it. It's like, I think Jerami Grant is a better player than Rui Hachimura. Like overall, I think he's a better player, even when you start to, question whether or not the defense is really there for Grant anymore. Like maybe he'd be better on a team like the Lakers, where there's a little more to play for, where the standards are a little bit higher and all of that kind of stuff. But in that sense, like Rui's not a great defender either. So it's not like we're trading in this scenario a great defender for a poor one. But you also have to factor in too, Andy, like what, your Grant's a really, pretty good accomplished third scorer. Scorer, average over 20 points a game for Portland and all that stuff. On this Lakers team, he's probably going to average something close to what Rui gave you. Aside from the games where LeBron and AD don't play, which is, I guess, a different story, he supplements the scoring, but that's not really what the Lakers need. The Lakers got plenty of scoring last year with Rui and Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell. Like, the offensive abilities of Grant, aside from his three-point shooting, which again, Rui did pretty well last year, I just don't see how you get better if it's Rui and draft picks and, other members of your rotation and all this stuff. That's before you get into the salary and all that stuff that Grant makes.
Yeah, I mean, there's other considerations too. Like Rui is not a good enough rebounder for his size, but he is prime Dennis Rodman compared to Jerami Grant. Like he's actually a better rebounder than Grant. And Grant is a more accomplished, proven scorer in terms of doing it at volume as a, more of a focal point option for a team than Rui has ever been. But like you said before, to some degree, it's like a different version of Christian Wood in that Christian Wood has shown that he can, at the very least on bad teams, be the focal point of an offense and put up some reasonably efficient, if empty calorie numbers. But again, that's not going to be his role on this team. So in a lot of ways, it doesn't even matter unless AD and LeBron are out a lot, in which case you got way bigger problems than what Jerami Grant can provide. To some degree, the fact that Jerami Grant is maybe a more talented or proven scorer than Rui, I don't know how much it matters. But like the reason I really started thinking about this 3-team deal, it gets extremely complex for the Lakers to try to come up with a scenario where they essentially get the equivalent of 2 trades that make it worth that giving up both of those firsts while not robbing themselves of so much infrastructure that they arguably went sideways, if not got a little bit worse.
Here's the question that you have to ask yourself. And I get it. Like you have a narrow window with LeBron and AD. Like I get all these considerations. The Lakers are good. They are not good enough as currently constituted. And that is like, in some ways it's better than just being flat, not good enough, or not very good, or any of those things. Like it's better to be a potentially 50-win team that needs to be like a 58-win team. So there are worse things. This is your shot. You can trade these picks one time. You got 2 picks. You can trade them once. You've got Dalton Connect. You can trade him once. You've got Austin Reeves. You can trade him once. Do you really want to empty your cupboard which is not filled with a lot of stuff, for Jerami Grant and Matisse Thybulle. I don't.
Jerami Grant, Anthony Simons, and Cam Johnson, and you've wiped out
the entire roster.
Again, I bring up Cam Johnson because he has been linked to the Lakers. We've been asked about Cam Johnson before.
Another player's always hurt.
Right. But Dorian Finney-Smith, I checked him out too. He does not make enough. Another complicating factor for this scenario I came up with. Dorian Finney-Smith doesn't make enough money. And the more you have to start adding more players from Brooklyn, the more it becomes prohibitive for the Lakers to make this trade, or for Portland takes somebody else back, or somebody Portland doesn't want.
3-team trades with guys like this are hard. So I realize it's frustrating, and it is a result in many ways of bad management. The Lakers are in this situation to begin with. I do not absolve them from how we got here. Russell Westbrook. But that said, and a bunch of other little small mistakes. But that doesn't mean you do something dumb now. Certain deals just don't pass the eye test. I don't think that can be the big move. I just don't. One thing that it could change how the rest of the summer goes for the Lakers and really the rest of the NBA, that is happening today. We will explain what it is next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find it exactly what it is you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available for U.S. customers.
Quick reminder that we thank you for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There is no offseason in the NBA. It's why we're here every day still. Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from the national local experts in 30 minutes or less. That often includes us. No one keeps you as informed and as entertained as Locked On NBA, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tuesday is a significant day in the NBA because it is the last day that Lauri Markkanen can be traded and extended somewhere, or can be signed and extended and then traded, or traded and signed, like all of these things. If you wait one more day and Markkanen extends with Utah, then the Jazz cannot trade him until next season. Why? Because the rules are, when you sign an extension like that, you can't be traded for 6 months. 6 months from Wednesday is one day after the trade deadline. And don't think for a second that Lauri Markkanen and his representatives aren't extremely aware of that. There are a lot of people who suppose, Andy, that Markkanen is waiting intentionally so that that first year, at least after he signs a deal, he knows he will not be traded and will have a little bit more influence over the process.
Yeah, I mean, Lauri Markkanen has said on the record, including during his exit interview, that, quote, "We love to be here, we being his family." I've said it multiple times, and my family likes to be here. It is highly suspected around the league that, like you said, if Lauri Markkanen signs an extension at all, it's going to be tomorrow, the 7th, Wednesday, at the absolute earliest. Although I would say, if, say, I don't know, around this time next week, Lauri Markkanen has not signed an extension, unless we are hearing reports of, look, they're just dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and his family's in Finland, he's just hanging out. But no, really, everybody expects this to happen. Then maybe there could be some expectation that he is going to be traded before the season begins, and the team that he's going to will figure out all that stuff later. And presumably they take him on. They don't want to trade him anyway, so they won't. Assuming they can't extend him, they don't care about being able to trade him.
The risk level goes up, when he doesn't have an extension, the willingness of teams to offer as much as they could for a player that is not guaranteed to stay.
But either
it just becomes less compelling.
But either way, the reason this matters so much is not because of any likelihood of the Lakers getting Lauri Markkanen. We've talked about this before. If Lauri Markkanen was to get traded by Utah, the odds of the Lakers being able to outbid the rest of the league is incredibly low for all the reasons we explained in the first two segments. But
to quote Dean Wormer, Andy, it is 0.0.
But I remember John Hollinger for The Athletic wrote about this maybe a month or so ago. There's been some chatter that after the initial, it wasn't really even a flurry of activity right around the free agency beginning. We've talked about it before. It's been by free agency standards, a pretty dormant one, but things shut down pretty quickly. And there had been a school of thought that a lot of teams were waiting to see what happens with Markkanen, whether because they want to get directly in on it or be maybe a third team that facilitates, or they're waiting to see how things loosen up when there's some resolution one way or the other. I think to a lesser but maybe still tangible degree, the situation between Brandon Ingram and the Pelicans and his impending extension or lack thereof is keeping things a little bit stagnant around the league. But there is some anticipation that resolution with Markkanen one way or the other relatively soon could create a little bit more action around the league and convert, by extension, the Lakers could maybe get in on it.
Yeah, I mean, look, he is the biggest name and the best player. And Utah's a strange team. Utah can just as easily make a case for moving forward and trying to build a pretty decent team that can make the playoffs around Markkanen. And I think they can. Like, they've got enough good players on it that they can certainly be, fringy play-in team and all that kind of stuff.
Very, very fringy. I mean,
that's where they've
they're
been.
A fringy play-in team. They're not even a fringy playoff team. They're a fringy play-in.
I consider the play.
But what they're not. This is the problem that they have with Lauri Markkanen. They don't get close enough to the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, but they have to weigh the odds of, okay, how much do we want to roll the dice on trying to get Flag, potentially miss? Do we like the next 3 or 4 or 5 players after Flag more than we like trying to build around Lauri Markkanen right now, or making
which matters because it is a deeper draft than just Flag,
right?
What everybody says,
but that's really what it is. Because I mean, right now with this team as is, they will have to bust their ass to get the 10 seed.
Oh no, I'm not saying that, I think they're, if things go well, whether you're a 500 team, a couple games over and all that kind of stuff. I'm just saying, they're too good to be, they're not, there are 5 or 6 or 7, 8 teams around the league that without a whole lot of effort are going to be worse than Utah.
Especially with Markkanen still on the team.
Right. The Utah the last couple seasons has had to try to be bad. They find reasons to keep Markkanen on the shelf, and they find other guys to put on the shelf, and they do all that kind of stuff. But, you still got, Sexton and Keontae George is a young player they like, and Jordan Clarkson's a good player coming off the bench. I'm not saying they're
Walker
awesome. Kessler, and all that. They're just not so bad that you can easily just be like, take Markkanen off this team. They're going to win 9 games. They're not that bad. So, hopefully this shakes things loose, if not necessarily even just for the Lakers right away, just to make the NBA offseason a little jazzier, no pun intended. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, congratulations to everybody. Happy Lauri Markkanen Day for all who celebrate. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to see the show, hang out with over 25,000 subscribers. Do want to let everybody know that we thank you again for making Locked On Lakers first listen today. And please go check out Locked On NBA, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NBA in the description of this very program, so you don't need to search for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We will be back on Wednesday. See everyone tomorrow.